Welcome everyone to the Friday Forum for October 11th, 2024. I'm your host, Keith Porter. I'm the Chief Engineer of ICLR. I'm speaking to you from London, Ontario, traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Luna-Pewack, and Attawandaron people. This is webinar 223 in a series hosted by ICLR, the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, Canada's leading source for disaster resilience knowledge. Each month, we present recently completed research related to ICLR's mission to make Canada more resilient to natural disasters. Last month, I spoke to you about the costs and benefits of building to a voluntary tornado-resistant building standard, an above-code standard. Next month, on November the 8th, David Gregory of CoreLogic will speak to us about single site risk assessment in commercial catastrophe risk assessment software. Today's speaker is Alison Bird of Natural Resources Canada. She's going to tell us about the rollout of Canada's new earthquake early warning system. That's an alerting system that, among other things, pushes an alarm to your phone if an earthquake is in progress and the shaking is approaching you. Gives you a few crucial seconds to take self-protective action, or potentially to stop and open elevator doors and other things that might reduce harm. Alison is an earthquake seismologist. She joined Natural Resources Canada in 2000. She researches earthquakes in Western Canada, and she and one other person tend to be the face and voice of NRCan's earthquake group when the press comes calling after earthquakes. Since 2020, she's been the Liaison and Outreach Officer of the Earthquake Early Warning Project. Before we begin, here's our agenda. Our webinar will last 90 minutes. Alison will present for about half that time, then I'll moderate questions for the rest of the time. Please feel free to chat your questions into the Q&A box. I'm going to pose your questions in the order that they appear in the Q&A box after Alison has finished her presentation. If we get a lot of questions, I may only pose your first question, then move on to others, then circle back to your additional questions. Our webinar is recorded. ICLR will post Alison's slides and a link to today's video on this afternoon or Tuesday morning. So if you have colleagues who couldn't attend, please let them know. You'll find the video and a PDF of our speaker's deck at www.iclr.org/workshops. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alison.
Thanks, Keith. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I can get things going. Get this into presentation mode. Oops. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a few things, mostly about earthquakes in Canada, a little bit about the Risk Profiler Toolkit, and also about earthquake early warning, which is my baby at the moment. So we have Indigenous histories of earthquakes going back centuries, if not millennia. And I should note that I am speaking to you from the lands of the Sonic people near Victoria, British Columbia on Vancouver Island. We've been doing instrumental seismic monitoring since 1898. And with current technologies, we're able to record and locate roughly 5,000 earthquakes a year in Canada. We record actually many more than that, but some of them are just too small or poorly registered to get a reliable location. The largest and most frequent earthquakes, of course, are along the west coast of British Columbia, where I am, but there are also significant earthquakes in the north, especially in the Yukon Territory, and in eastern Ontario and southern Quebec. So all these data go into helping define the seismic provisions within the National Building Code. And you can see I'm in a very dark purple area there, very high hazard in southern Vancouver Island, but also in eastern Canada, you can see along the Ottawa River Valley and the St. Lawrence Seaway, there is considerable seismic hazard. So for me, this is the place to be to study earthquakes. We've got all three major types of plate boundary right off our coastline. We've got a mid-ocean ridge, which is very similar to the mid-Atlantic ridge. It's where two oceanic plates slowly move apart. As the gap opens up between them, mantle material rises and fills in that gap, cools and becomes new plates. So these are essentially plate factories. You tend to get relatively small earthquakes along this sort of a fault, usually only about magnitude 5, and of course they're well offshore. So they don't really pose much of a threat, but they're certainly interesting. And then along the west coast of Haida Gwaii, we've got a dominantly strike slip fault, very similar to the San Andreas fault in California. And we've had the two largest instrumentally recorded earthquakes along this fault. We had a magnitude 8.1 in 1949, and then more recently in 2012, we had a magnitude 7.8. Most people, however, in this region are focused on the north end of the Cascadia subduction zone. We've got the Juanifica plate pushing beneath the North America plate. Currently, those two plates are locked. When they do rupture, it is going to be a megathrust earthquake. So these are the largest earthquakes that occur in the world. They're usually about magnitude 9 or so, and they do trigger tsunami. So these are really the most dramatic sort of earthquake that can happen. However, because the two plates are stuck together and the two plates are still moving toward each other, you do have also earthquakes occurring in the North America plate, which is the one we're all sitting on. And those can be shallow. They can be close to populated areas, and they can be about magnitude 7, 7.5. So those can be extremely damaging. You can also have earthquakes in the subduction Juanifica plate. That star represents the magnitude 6.8 Nisqually earthquake that happened near Olympia in 2000, and those can be quite large also. So I mentioned the difference between east and west. One of the other differences is that even though the earthquakes tend to be smaller in the east, they can actually impact a greater area. Because of the style of crust there, it's quite dense. The seismic waves stay strong to greater distances, so they impact a larger area than they would in the west. They also have a lot more infrastructure and people in their vicinity, so there's more that can be affected, and a lot of that infrastructure is more vulnerable to seismic shaking. And they've got a lot more brick structures and stone structures in the east, and they don't stand up very well to seismic shaking. Oops, sorry, I don't know what happened there. We've had quite a few damaging earthquakes in our history. The last major earthquake in the Vancouver Island area was a magnitude 7.3 in 1946. It occurred in the North America plate, so quite shallow and close to the surface, so close to the people. It impacted quite a lot of brick buildings. Most of the chimneys in the region were damaged. The lower image is of the Haida Gwaii magnitude 7.8. It triggered innumerable landslides. It happened in late October, so there'd been a lot of rain, and of course it's quite hilly on Haida Gwaii, and so there were a lot of landslides. There are also quite a few instances of strong damaging earthquakes in the east. Even though they're smaller, they did cause a lot of damage. Certainly the Saguenay earthquake in 1988, even though it was 5.9, damaged a lot of brick and stone buildings. And you can see on the far right, the Val des Bois earthquake was only a magnitude 5, but it did damage some buildings and roadways. So typical damage from an earthquake, I mentioned brick before. I'd like to point out that even in this brick building, which was quite badly damaged, this is severe damage. If the people had gotten underneath that table, they'd done their drop, cover, hold on, which is the right response for an earthquake, they would have protected themselves very nicely, much better than if they had tried to evacuate out of that left-hand doorway. This is an example from Kobe. It is a poorly reinforced concrete structure. There's excellent rebar going up the columns and along the beams, but very little transverse or wrapped reinforcement holding it together so it can stay linear and do its job and hold up that beam. That beam's now being held up by a Coke machine, which is not safe at all. Houses, despite this image, houses tend to do quite well, especially wood frame construction. What often fails are things like porches, poorly constructed additions, chimneys, especially if they fall toward the house. So I do have a chimney in this house. You've probably seen the fireplace behind me. What I've done is I've put extra planking around where that chimney passes through the attic. So if the bricks fall toward the house, they don't come through to the floors below where we are. So they just rest in the attic. And then of course garages. You've got a big open space on one end, very little strength or stiffness in that, and that often can fail. Most people, however, in North American architecture are more likely to be injured by internal contents rather than structural damage. because our structures tend to do quite well. So on the left-hand side, we've got a tragic image from the Napa Valley earthquake, and on the right, a typical office where you've got light fixtures, ceiling tiles, furniture. These are the things that could be falling and injuring people. So that's why we want people to get underneath a desk or table or chair, protect themselves from that falling debris. A lot of things can also be triggered by earthquakes. Landslides, I mentioned earlier, with the Haida Gwaii event. This is an example from San Salvador. This landslide took out 2.5 blocks, and that really was the entirety of the damage from that earthquake. The structures did well, but that landslide was quite devastating. If you can have often really badly damaged roadways, what happens is the subsurface sort of slumps or fails in some way, and it doesn't support this superstructure, and then the roadways become impassable. This example is from the recent Alaska earthquake. And then on the right, we have a couple of examples of liquefaction. So this is when you have sandy soils that have some fluid in them. If they get shaken, they start to become like a liquid, like a quicksand, very temporarily. It does go back to being solid afterwards, but for that time, it's not supporting the structure above. So on the upper image, we have the Kocaeli earthquake in Turkey, where the building is now leaning on its neighbor. It's otherwise not damaged, but it's certainly not habitable. And then the lower image is from Christchurch, where a lot of roadways failed because of liquefaction. And there are several images of sort of nosediving vehicles. So that heavy engine is pulling the vehicle down into the soft sediments. Tsunami are a series of ocean waves, not just one wave, that are generated most often by a subduction zone earthquake. This is because the ocean floor suddenly moves vertically and it pushes that entire water column, and that water column spreads out. It's a bit like when you drop a pebble into a pond, except that it's an upward push rather than a downward push, and it spreads out. And because of the mass of that water, these waves have a lot of energy and momentum, and they can be extremely dangerous. They can also be triggered by landslides from the coast into water, or an underwater landslide, and then other phenomena such as volcanic eruption and meteor impact, but those are extremely rare. So this is an image of a model of the Cascadia subduction zone generated tsunami. You can see that first wave coming around toward Victoria. It gets there at about an hour or so after the earthquake, and then it makes its way around through the Gulf and San Juan Islands toward Vancouver. So it does weaken during this process, but even Vancouver, which would have low-lying areas inundated possibly, it's mostly a matter of very strong erratic currents that can pull apart marinas and damage beach areas and that sort of thing. So we encourage people to evacuate away from the coastline if they feel strong shaking, and then stay there for some time, because these can go on for over a day. So as I mentioned, they're very forceful. They have a lot of energy and momentum, and they can carry debris. And that debris is often cars, parts of houses. You can see some silos in the background here. This is from the Tohoku earthquake. And our human bodies are extremely vulnerable compared to these large, heavy, hard objects. So it's best to stay away. Even a small 20-centimeter wave can knock you off your feet and throw you around because of that power. Even a 2.4-meter wave. This is in Chile. It tossed around these shipping containers like they were toys. And I should note that first wave is often not the highest. In the Chilean example, the first wave was only 20 centimeters. The third wave was 2.4 meters. That's the one that did most damage. So it's best to not assume that the wave action is not going to be harmful. Stay evacuated away from that coastline. After the earthquake, of course, you can be without utilities for some time, water, sewage, electricity, and internet. This map is of Christchurch 2 weeks after the earthquake, and you can see that the orange areas have some of their utilities restored. The red areas have none. So very often people are essentially camping after an earthquake, and that lower left image could be the glamour of their life for some time. So a little bit about Risk Profiler. I used to be working on this project, and it was a really exciting one. What we were doing was we were taking our hazard models, which I showed you earlier, and we're also running scenario models. So we were taking different earthquakes that we expect to occur and figuring out what kind of ground motion would be a result of that earthquake. And then we took all sorts of exposure models. So we took the buildings where people are settled, how those buildings are used, what kind of structures they are, what kind of land they're on. So if you're on softer land, often it causes amplification, and then figuring out how these buildings would be impacted, how people would be impacted. We also looked at the social vulnerability of people, because some people have good social structure, that they have people they can rely on for help. Some people have, they have good emergency kits. Other people don't have the money for the kits, sort of that sort of thing. So we looked at the social vulnerability of our populations. And then we put this into a risk profiler online tool. So this is a freely accessible for everyone. It's useful for engineers, emergency managers and planners especially, but even the public can use this to figure out, what is my hazard? Like, what are my risks, and how can I mitigate those risks? So what you can do is you can choose a scenario earthquake. There are many in this database, and we will be adding as we have time to create these scenarios. You can figure out, see what kind of ground motion would be caused by this earthquake, and then what kind of damage, and at different states, how many injuries. There's even a layer that tells you how many truckloads of debris will be generated. And then you can figure out how you might respond. There's also a great little tool in here where you can retroactively, you can retrofit your high risk buildings and then run the scenario again and see what that benefit is of retrofitting just those buildings, and see what how you want to approach that. So it's an excellent tool. I encourage you to go online and play around with it. So now about earthquake early warning. So this has been proving successful in other countries. It started off in Japan and Mexico. It's been expanded into Taiwan and several other countries, and most recently into the United States, in California, Oregon, and Washington. It is triggered by the P wave. That's the fastest wave that is generated by the earthquake, and that's the initial jolt or rumble you might experience. And the idea is we process that P wave data very quickly, and we send out the alert before the arrival of the slower S wave. That's the big side to side motion that tends to cause the damage. So we're providing you with seconds to tens of seconds of warning, and this can allow protective measures to be taken. So Keith mentioned earlier, taking protective actions, that's the drop, cover, hold on, generally speaking. If you're in bed, of course, you stay in bed, roll onto your stomach, cover your head with your pillow. If you're driving, you pull over. Different things like that you can do with a few seconds. And then also, it can be used to trigger automated protective actions, like stopping trains, closing valves, and that sort of thing. And I'll show you a little bit more about that later, but here's the little cartoon. So you see the alert went out, the train stopped, people were alerted, and then that big shaking comes through. So the earthquake early warning system is made up of dense networks of specialized sensors. We don't use the regular monitoring network for this because it's not the right technology. We use high-speed communications in various forms, so we're not relying on one. Multiple data centers, again, for redundancy. There's cross-border interoperability because we're using USGS's software, and this helps with us with sharing our data with them so that we're able to more effectively locate and alert for earthquakes in the border area. Of course, we have cybersecurity. This is a huge must because we don't want people hacking into the system and wreaking havoc. And then alerts will be sent to the public via the National Public Alerting System, and then to technical partners more directly so that they can trigger those automated actions. So the alerts will be triggered based on the thresholds of magnitude, which is the strength of the earthquake itself, and then the intensity, which is the strength of shaking. So the earthquake has one magnitude and many intensities. Generally speaking, the further you are from an earthquake, the less you're going to feel it, but it can also be dependent on the kind of ground you're in. So we will only be alerting for potentially harmful earthquakes, not all the types of earthquakes that you will feel. As I mentioned before, the alerts to the public will be through NPAS. This is operated by Pelmerex for instance, the weather network for severe weather, and also Ember alerts and that sort of thing. We'll be alerting the public for magnitude 5 and above earthquakes, and only for intensities of 4 and above. So where you start to get shaking strong enough that it could cause harm. The distribution will be to smartphones via cell towers in the strong motion region, and radio and television through the census divisions. So of course, we want people to respond appropriately to this, even though the message does say drop, cover, hold on. People tend to do what we call milling, which is where they see some information on their phone and then they start to want to look for more information rather than acting on that advice. So there's a huge public education initiative to build that awareness, build that culture of awareness in our regions where we have earthquake early warning, so that people do that drop, cover, hold on. The public alerting will be at approximately this level of frequency. I should note that these are different scales on each map. In Haida Gwaii in North Vancouver Island, you could expect up to 15% chance of an earthquake early warning each year. And in the east, in sort of the Saguenay-Charlevoix region, you can expect about 5% chance each year. So that's actually quite a decent amount of probability. The coverage areas, that green polygon is the region within which an earthquake can occur, and we can reliably send out that alert. Earthquakes outside this area, we could still send alerts for, but it just won't be as fast or as reliable, simply because of the distribution of stations. But most earthquakes that could be harmful are within that polygon. So I mentioned that we'll be sending alerts directly to technical partners, which could be critical infrastructure operators and other technical users such as industrial facilities. This is direct, so this is they will be accessing our message broker, and it will be for lower thresholds, so they can decide at what level they want to do things, because we will be providing them with information on the magnitude, the modified Mercalli intensity, peak ground velocity, and peak ground acceleration, so that they can decide what things to do under different situations. For instance, my husband works for a telescope. It's very high precision optical equipment, which is very delicate. They may want to enact shutdowns at lower intensities than at other industrial facilities. So technical partners will access these messages and then parse them into their own systems, which will have automated technologies in place. There are 3 different types of messages. They can get just the event, which is quite boring: time, location, and magnitude. It doesn't really give you very much information. But if you get the polygon, which shows you the area of strong shaking, or if you get the more high resolution intensity grid, this can provide you with information on what to do. Maybe you have multiple facilities, so you do different things at different areas based on the level of intensity. I should mention that the grid one is slightly slower. A couple of examples for you. If we had that magnitude 7.346 earthquake again, and the earthquake early warning system was operating, people in Vancouver and Victoria would get tens of seconds of warning, which is actually a decent amount of time to react. People in Cumberland, I have a colleague who works from there. She's in the late alert zone, so she won't get the alert before the strong shaking. You're just too close to the epicenter. It's not possible to get that alert to you in time. In Quebec, if we use that the Saguenay, Quebec example, that would provide half a minute of warning to Quebec City and about a minute and a half to Montreal, Ottawa, and Fredericton. You can actually do quite a lot with that period of time. So the system has been operational in, oops, I don't know why this is a repeat. Sorry, it's been operational in BC since May of this year, and it will be going live in Eastern Canada within the next few months. And I've shown you the rest of this already. And those automated responses can do things like stopping trains. This has happened many times in Japan, where there's been a strong earthquake. They stopped trains. Those rail lines were damaged. The trains would have derailed had they continued. And they had hundreds, if not thousands, of people aboard. So it's a very tangible way in which earthquake and early warning can make a difference. When Japan started its early warning, it was mostly for the trains and also the alarms in hospitals so that they can stop surgery and other delicate procedures. Opening fire hall and ambulance bay doors so they don't get jammed shut. Those vehicles can still get out and go and help people. Diverting aircraft from landing, stopping traffic from going onto bridges or into tunnels. Keith mentioned the elevators, stopping them at the nearest floor and opening the door so that people don't get trapped. Closing valves, you're protecting your water source. You're also protecting the environment from hazardous chemicals. Parking your hard drive so you can protect your software and your data so you can be operational after an earthquake, especially important for people in emergency response organizations, and also readying those generators so that you can be operational right away. So a few things to consider. Most alerts will be received seconds to tens of seconds before strong shaking. There is that almost always that late alert zone where it just is not possible to get that alert to you in time, unfortunately. Now, false and missed alerts are pretty well inevitable. This is a fully automated system and it's working on essentially a heartbeat of data. And it's really tricky. I'm actually quite amazed at what this software can do, but it is not infallible. And unfortunately, there may be missed and false alerts. This will be reduced over time as the system learns to operate better. We are hoping to use some machine learning that has been used elsewhere for that. And if you're a technical partner, you may receive multiple earthquake early warning messages for a single event, because something like the Cascadia megathrust earthquake takes actually minutes to rupture. So initially, only a small amount of rupture will have happened and we will have received that data and think, okay, this is a relatively smaller earthquake. We'll send out the alert. And then as that rupture grows, we realize this is a bigger and bigger earthquake. And so that information needs to be updated so that you have that up-to-date information. And also it means that a larger area will need to be alerted. So more people in the outer areas would get alerts after that. Most importantly, earthquake early warning is only effective if people and systems respond appropriately to the alert. If people don't drop cover, hold on. If critical infrastructure operators don't have those automated technologies in place, the system is worthless. So we are hoping that we can build people's awareness and also work with those critical infrastructure operators to get them on board the system and so they can take advantage of this technology. So we are engaging with critical infrastructure operators. We will soon be launching a webpage, which will have a lot of materials such as these booklets and one-pagers, also a testing application with display so that they can figure out how to use it in their operations, and also a template agreement so they can see what legally we have to get involved with. We did have our first earthquake early warning last month. It was very exciting. We had a magnitude of 6.4 off Haida Gwaii. It was calculated that there would be strong shaking in the southern Moresby Island region within that the second largest circle. So in that area, we knew we'd need to alert. So the InPass system alerted to TVs and radios, CBC radio and satellite TV in the census subdivision that includes that area, which is all of Moresby Island. So included the town of Sandspit. My colleague Lisa Nicolation was up working on some equipment in the area at the time, and people were talking to her about it, very excited that they received this alert on their radio or TV, and then a little while later they felt strong shaking. Because the MPAS system alerts to cell towers within the area of strong shaking, in other words, in that circle, it only alerted that area. There are no cell towers in that area, so no one received the alert through their phone. This is simply a situation where you have a very large census subdivision and you have a small area of strong shaking. But generally speaking, most places where you would have this sort of situation, that the census subdivision and the strong area of shaking would essentially line up and people would get the same sort of alerts on their phone and their TV. So in summary, earthquakes are common in several regions of Canada and can be large and damaging. The risk profiler tool is useful for many people, and I encourage you to try it out. The earthquake early warning will provide up to tens of seconds of warning, strong shaking, and can reduce the impact of major earthquakes when people and systems take protective action. It has been operational in BC since May and is expected to go live in Eastern Canada within a few months. And the next steps are for us to onboard our first few critical infrastructure operators, engage with other critical infrastructure operators and potential technology developers of those automated response technologies. We want to build that capacity in Canada. And we will be having an advertising campaign in Eastern Canada, in Eastern Ontario and in Quebec in the coming months. So do watch out for that. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Alison. That was a great talk. I'm so excited to see earthquake early warning coming to Canada. While our attendees sort of think about questions, let me ask you some that I had in mind. So, automated actions, you named several possible automated actions, 10 or so. Um, they all require infrastructure, labor, maintenance, training, and so on. What automated actions do you are in the pipeline right now? You're already talking with partners about, and what are your highest priority ones to encourage the adoption of?
Yeah, our highest priority at the moment, we're targeting mostly transportation, energy and utilities, and the healthcare sector. We have had some meetings with people, and we actually had some workshops earlier. And so we have already started our onboarding process for transportation person group, which has sort of commuter train service. And they already have some technologies in place which can be triggered that stop their trains in safe locations, open gates at their stations so that people can egress easily, and put announcements on the PA system and on their monitors. When we were speaking to hospitals, they said they already have a PA system they can easily program to do earthquake early warning and to the alarms in the operating theaters. They have elevator recall, although they said that would require some programming because the elevator recall is to go to the bottom floor. And we want people
Mhm.
to stop at the nearest floor because we may not have time to get all the way down to the bottom. Some elevators can be quite slow. And they do have another system that can ready their generators. So those can be in place. They're also interested in hospitals because they have a lot of equipment, delicate equipment for their laboratories, which spin and do things like that. They would like to shut those down, but they're looking at how long that would take and what kind of trigger that would require. So we have started this process with a few. We're also going to be onboarding an emergency management organization that simply wants to be able to take that information and incorporate it in their portal for their emergency responders so that they can get that information right away.
Awesome. Is the interaction with the energy sector going to conflict with the elevator recall? I mean, presumably energy operators might want to stop generation to protect generation equipment, which might turn off the power before the elevators have a chance to move to a nearby floor and open the doors. Is that going to be a problem?
That's a good question. It's not something that came up, but
Okay.
I will bring that up in our next meeting.
Okay.
Because yes, I mean, a lot of these technologies will require the energy to trigger. I know that we were speaking with a fire hall that is keen to get their doors opened. They already have technology in place for that. But of
Mhm.
course, they would need a few seconds of electricity at least to get that done. So yeah, that is something to consider. So far, the energy sector has not been that concerned. We spoke to a gas provider, and they said they would still want a human element in the mix. They wouldn't want their gas to be turned off automatically. They would want a
Mhm.
human to decide and push the button.
Have you, yeah, that reminds me of the gas distribution. What's the gas distribution company in BC? Um, they're putting in smart meters, new
Yes.
smart, and they were hoping to control, the smart meters aren't going to have earthquake early warning or any kind of earthquake shut-off valves. They were too far down the process of acquiring those to change direction on that. But they said, well, maybe we could, close off the grid based on ground motion.
Yeah. And
You're talking.
I've been speaking with them too because there are different messages that have been given. Some organizations say, that people, if you smell gas, you should shut off your gas. Whereas other organizations say, leave your property and call 911 or call us. But my concern is that in a major earthquake, first of all, the phone lines are often impacted almost instantly. I try to tell people, don't use the phone if you can. The phone lines are impacted. You're going to have multiple leaks and distributed across a large area. The roadways will be damaged, and you have limited capacity to get to those places, and difficulty getting there. So relying on the gas organization's staff to deal with multiple, and they're probably going to be dealing with their own problems, even with they want to know that their family is safe before they embark on that. And probably their office will need attention as well. So it's going to be tricky. So I've actually yesterday sent some examples from the Northridge earthquake, where there were 3 major ruptures of gas lines, and then 142, I think, in total, and several fires that were caused, and phone lines were impacted, roadways are impacted, and it really was a challenge for the gas people.
Yeah. So let's talk about organizational participation. I think that everybody on the line is thinking, well, if I live in this area, it's great that I'm going to get this, Amber Alert style warning on my phone. But what can an organization like an insurance company to do or do with earthquake early warning? Are you working with employers to sort of integrate earthquake early warning into shakeout and get people aware of it when they do drop cover and hold on? How are you trying to integrate with shakeout and with just sort of general big companies?
Well, I'm on the organizing committee for Shakeout BC, which isn't surprising. And we did have earthquake early warning as a theme last year.
Mhm.
And I will be speaking, I'm going to be giving a public webinar next week about earthquake early warning. It's an annual Ask the Experts webinar before Shakeout. And I'll be at the media event pushing it as well. I'm at any opportunity to talk about earthquake early warning, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
I think my family and friends are tired of the subject. But we also, a colleague and I, a colleague who's on the risk profiler project, and I spoke a month or so ago at the insurance brokers conference, and it was well attended, and there was a lot of discussion, and we gave a presentation, a session, and then there was a panel session at the end of the conference, and they started getting very excited and thinking about how incorporating earthquake early warning technologies could help the insurance sector. So maybe there should be sort of a benefit to incorporating these technologies financially or through your insurance. They haven't incorporated that yet, but it was a topic that came up.
Mhm.
And I think we need to have these sorts of systems where you can encourage earthquake resilient measures. Adding retrofitting. Adding strength and stiffness to the ground floor of a structure. Having those earthquake early warning technologies, having supplies. These are all things that help make people and safer and more resilient in an earthquake. I mean, what I tell people, it's not just about surviving the earthquake. It's about being comfortable afterwards. If you've been through the trauma of a major earthquake, you do not want to be suffering for weeks after, miserably cold and wet and not eating good food. I mean, my emergency kit has good food in it.
Hmm.
If I been through an earthquake, I mean, food for me is a comfort. I especially like spicy food. So I've got Indian curries in there. I got chili peppers. I put stuff in there that I want to eat. Good chocolate, throw stuff in there
Uh-huh.
that you want to eat that's going to help keep you going. Make sure that you have, like camping equipment is a great start to a kit. If your house is too badly damaged, you could be in your garden instead of at a shelter with a bunch of snoring strangers. I mean, it's nice to be at home. And if a lot of the time the damage is things like the house is fine, but the windows are broken. Well,
Mhm.
you could be a bit cold if it's wintertime. Pitch your tent in the middle of your living room. It helps keep you a little bit more comfortable. So there are little things you can do to make sure that you're going to be comfortable and that reduce that psychosocial impact of the earthquake.
Mhm. I'm going to come back to elevators in a minute. but there's a couple of questions now. Chris Petullo asks, what's the timeline for CI providers? I don't know what CI providers are.
Critical
To
infrastructure.
critical infrastructure providers to register with the system to be able to get access and utilize it.
Well, I'm starting to bring people on now. It takes time. Of course, we have to do the agreement. We have to do the testing with them to make sure it's working properly. And we're a small group, unfortunately. With the United States, we're learning a lot from them. They have an army of people. They even have a group of people who do social science research, looking at people how people respond to alerts in different situations and different types of alerts and different demographics. We don't have that, so we're benefiting a lot from them and learning how they did things. And they had essentially a huge group to onboard technical partners, and it's been a slow process with them. We have a smaller group, so it will be slow, unfortunately. I'm I'm very keen that we bring them on as fast as possible, carefully but fast, because the sooner we have these in place, the sooner we can benefit when there's an earthquake. So um, I'm really excited about the first few we have lined up. We can't bring more people on in the east yet because we don't have the system fully operational there yet. It's just it takes a little longer because it's a larger region. We have to get more instruments in, and also you have to test the system before you turn it on to the public. And so you need a certain number of moderate sized earthquakes in test mode that we're internally receiving alerts for, to make sure that the system is behaving as designed. I mean, some stations it's proven that they're triggering too often, so those have to be tweaked. So we have to make sure that's working before we bring on Eastern CI providers. But yeah, it'll be gradual. But I'm hoping that we'll have a good number within a year or two.
Wonderful. An
Sorry, that
anonymous,
was a very long-winded answer.
no, it's fine, it's fine. Anonymous attendee asks, you described having primary service providers to come online with earthquake earthquake early warning. Are these parties required to do so, or is there a choice? What if primary parties like gas companies choose not to participate in earthquake early warning?
That's their choice. We can't force people. This is not legislated. So
Okay.
I mean, most people are quite keen. When we've had our workshops, people were extremely excited about the opportunity. I mean, most providers are keen to improve their resilience to earthquakes, and interested in improving public safety. When we talked about the different things they might do with it, I was surprised at the number of ideas that they came up with, and one of them was often, having this as an instance of how they're trying to help keep people safe. So no, I think people will be quite keen, but yeah, we can't force people. I know that the gas company is they're not sure because they're not sure how they would use it. And also dams, people who run hydropower dams, they said mostly it's going to be about alerting their staff. There's not much they can do physically, but if they can alert their staff so their staff are safe, that's the main thing, because often these places are in areas where there's very little cell reception. And so we need, they'll need to have alarms in the facilities.
Mhm. Coming back to elevators, I think that when you're talking about elevator recall, you're talking about a particular hospital or healthcare provider, right? You weren't talking with Otis about all their elevators in BC, right?
We did talk with the company, a company that works with a governmental agency on all their elevators, and they
Mm.
were interested. So I would love to see this in every elevator.
Mhm.
I think because this has been, it's not something you want to think about, but people do get trapped in elevators in earthquakes. So if we can get them out easily, then that would be a huge bonus, I think.
Huge, absolutely. I did a study a few years ago that said more than 20,000 people could be trapped in elevators in the San Francisco Bay Area from a big earthquake. And that could be hours or days because of the power and the fact that the firefighter's busy. Let's go back to the gas company. Fortis was the company that I was thinking about. You said that a gas company wasn't sure how they would use it. And what I find sort of alarming about that is that I totally get we don't know how we would use it. My worry is, does that mean that they will just not do anything, or they'll continue to not know how they would use it for years and years and years until kind of it's too late? Or do you have plans to help them figure out how to use it, or are you encouraging them to figure out how
Yeah.
to use it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not that they're not interested in using it. It's just they're figuring out how they could incorporate it in their systems because of the way that their systems work. It's not they're not interested in it. It's that they're like they were the one who were saying, "Huh, I'm not sure how we could do this," and that they felt that they should still have a human as part of that process. I'm encouraging people not to have a human because it slows down the whole response. If you can automate things so that it all gets triggered and you don't have that person making that decision and pushing that button. But but for many earthquakes, it would still work with a human involved. It just depends on how far they are from that earthquake. Because the further you are from the earthquake, the more warning time you get.
But are they dedicating resources to figuring it out, or are they just sort of sitting around saying, "Well, we can't figure it out"?
No, I think they're interested in dedicating resources. But
Okay.
it's just it's still early in the game. I mean, we've only just turned on in BC, and we're doing public alerting right now. But bringing on those technical partners is going to take time, unfortunately.
Okay. Chris Patullo says, thanks for your response. Emergency management professionals have been hearing about the system and wanting to make use of it for some time. I'm concerned that in our pursuit of near perfection, we may be sacrificing good enough. So he's talking about perfect being the enemy of the good.
Yes,
We,
yes. My husband's an engineer, so he's using that a lot too.
okay, uh, we already have numerous systems that are able to use these alerts, be it automatic door opening or simply building notification systems. Beyond that, we're at risk of reaching earthquake early warning apathy by having years upon years of the earthquake early warning is an incredible system that can warn you about earthquakes, combined with, but you can't access it yet and won't be able to for a long time. He says, I assume he's a he, it may be better to reserve future promotion and publication campaigns until the system is at a point that people can register for it and make use of it. But you said that the Pelmerix network is
It
national.
is working. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean it is working in BC. I mean, I showed
right.
that alert that did go out for the Haida Gwaii earthquake. It's just and it will be launched in within a few months in Eastern Canada. So it is operating. It's just it's just bringing on the technical partners, which will be doing things like stopping trains and things. And that actually is it's happening. I mean, we're slowly doing it in Vancouver. And no, if we have been in contact with several critical infrastructure operators, it should happen um, relatively soon. It just takes time. But they will be coming online. But public alerting is yeah, for sure, is happening.
So yeah, we spend so much time talking about these the edges of the problem that sometimes we underemphasize. The center of it is, wow, you're going to get the warning on your phone, you're going to be able to drop, and that's everybody.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah, even
additional,
visitors.
yeah, that's
People
one.
people visiting will get it, which is fantastic. I mean, not having to sign up, not having, any sort of registration or anything, having it fully automatic is, I think, a huge boon.
Yeah, and an app that you might accidentally delete or can't figure
Yeah.
out how to download or whatever like that. Yeah, I find that that's a really exciting part of that of your system. Andrea Wickenheiser asks, what does the gas line automation or participation look like on the American side for their system? And can we mirror that? I have an answer for that but I'd go after after
I
if you have
don't, do they
about it.
have any yet? I was looking through their case studies and I don't know. They have water systems that have implemented earthquake early warning. A couple hospitals, an airport, actually 2 airports now. Train systems, several train systems. I don't know of any gas line automation down there.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah, I
you
don't
keep?
know.
No,
No, I
okay.
don't. I know that neither
That's a good
PG.
question. Good idea.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not aware of any gas network that has uh, any uh, added seismic shutoff valves to meters. No smart meters with shutoff valves. There's a lot of places that are rolling out a lot of mechanical devices that shut off the meter when acceleration reaches some point. But
Mhm.
I'm not aware of any gas companies that are doing anything either at the distribution or the transmission level with earthquake early warning. Let's see. Uh, Chris just added a comment to us. Thank you, Chris. Let's see. What else? You you made uh, a distinction that maybe it isn't very important for this in this context, but I'm fussy and like to clarify technical distinctions. You said magnitude 5 or greater or intensity 4 or greater. Would you explain to our attendees what the difference between magnitude and intensity is?
Yeah, so magnitude is the size of the earthquake. A lot of people think of Richter, but Richter is actually only really for California, for that style of earthquake and the instruments they use there. But they're all very similar. It's just that some magnitude scales, they're measured different ways, but essentially it's the same thing. It's like you're measuring length, but just using a different kind of level. But some magnitudes, they plateau at larger magnitudes because the shrinking doesn't get greater, but it goes on for longer. And so a magnitude 8, 9 goes on for longer than an 8, but really the level of shaking isn't greater. That's probably way too technical for you. But anyway,
Okay.
the magnitude is the size of the earthquake itself. It's how big the earthquake is. And then the intensity is how strong the shaking is. And so you can estimate it through the peak ground velocity or the peak ground acceleration, which is, the ground motion, but also the sorts of things that people notice. So we have a did you feel it little questionnaire on our website. So when people feel an earthquake, we encourage them to fill that out because we only have a certain number of seismometers in whatever epicentral region. We've got thousands of people, and they can actually provide more data. I've actually done research on our did you feel it reports from the Haida Gwaii earthquake, for instance. And so how long the shaking seemed to last, if things were swaying, if things rattled, if things fell over, what kind of things fell over, did cracks appear in your walls, did your chimney get damaged? So there are different levels depending, and were you woken up by it? So that's one way, were you woken up by the earthquake? How many people around you noticed it? That sort of thing. So they fill out this report and it comes up with a number.
Mhm.
And so intensity 4 is where things really start to fall over, and it gets to the point where people could be injured. So it's not, I mean, there might be cracks that form, but you're not going to have structural damage with an intensity 4. The intensity that has to be much greater for structural damage, but people could get injured by those falling items. So we want people to be safe, and so that's the level at which we start to alert people. And it's the same
Yeah,
level that they use in the States too.
and another way to say that is that the earthquake has one magnitude measure, but the intensity varies by where you are. So it's like
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
if the
generally speaking, the closer you are, the higher the intensity you'll feel. But also we do see when we create these maps of intensity after an earthquake, you can often see there are sort of ribbons of higher intensities leaking into lower intensities along river valleys because you've got soft ground there. People are feeling it more strongly than their neighbors who are on bedrock. So it does depend on what kind of ground you're on as well.
Thanks. Another sort of technical question. The time between when the computer gets the information about shaking and when a message pops up on your phone, which I think we call latency. How long is
Yep.
that?
Oh, it's about usually about, well, it depends. The when it's detected, between when it's detected and the alert goes out can be as little as 3 seconds,
Mhm.
which I think is quite amazing because you have to get 4 stations in order to send out an alert. And you're not going to do it on one station because single stations get jolted all the time from traffic going by and that sort of thing. But if you have 4 stations recorded at once, then you know it's a real event. You send out the alert. However, how long it takes after that alert is sent to National Public Alerting System to when it gets to your phone or your TV or your radio can vary depending on the means of transmission, their processing their end. So that could be a few more seconds. And
Mhm.
we all know that cell phones are not perfect at receiving alerts in a timely manner, which is a
Mm.
problem. But we're trying to get this out to as many people as possible, as fast as possible. And so they're doing it's doing the best it can. We have been speaking with cell providers, and they are quite keen to help improve the speed of the alerts to people. So they are aware of this system and this need.
Awesome.
I'm just my phone seems to be buzzing. So
Sorry, go ahead, take care of that.
I didn't want to interfere.
Um, Among those, like those one pager handouts and stuff, is that stuff that is in a format that's appropriate for, say, an insurer to download and distribute to employees or to insureds?
Yep. Yeah, we have a public version, and we also have one that's more targeted for critical infrastructure operators, and they're available. They're fully publicly available. And I can share the links to those. Well, actually, the link to this critical infrastructure one is not yet live, but I can share the document with you. You can share it around to the people on the call. Absolutely. And also the guides and everything like that, it will all be publicly available. It's all pretty well open source.
And if people on the call are getting all excited and on this webinar are getting all excited and saying, "Wow, I want to do something." When is Shakeout, and how much time is there for them to sort of get involved with their organization and do some Shakeout stuff?
I would love it if they did Shakeout. I mean, I think that everyone, I don't care where you live in Canada, because a lot of people tend to travel, and they travel to places which are seismically active because the tectonics create the beautiful landscapes that we want to visit. So everyone should practice drop, cover, hold on. It's next Thursday, which is the 17th of October. So it's at 10:17 in the morning. Please do register. Shakeout BC is actually having a competition with Shakeout Washington to try and get as many registrations as possible. And if we lose, I have to send a whole bunch of maple syrup down to Washington State. And I got to figure out how to do that. So I really, really want us to win. So yeah, by practicing drop, cover, hold on, what you're doing is you're creating muscle memory. So when you're under stress, like during a major earthquake, your brain doesn't function very well and you tend to run. It's that fight or flight kicking in. And running is one of the worst things you can do because it can cause you to fall. You can end up with things falling on you. And as you exit a building, that's actually one of the most dangerous places. That's where most of the damage happens, is around the outside edges of buildings. So I really encourage people, practice drop, cover, hold on. Your body will then take you to that safe space during an earthquake. Please get all your family, friends, colleagues to do it. Please register if you can. In BC is
Where?
Shake Up
Oh,
BC,
okay, awesome. Sorry.
Shake Up BC in BC, Grand Secousse in Quebec, and there's also Shake Out Yukon. And if you're not in Yukon, Quebec, Ontario is also a part of Grand Secousse. They've just gone bilingual, and or BC. Just register for Shakeout BC. It doesn't really matter that much where you are. It mostly matters that you do it. If you can't do it at 10:17 that morning, do it at some point. And in fact, I encourage you to do it with your family, and do it in each room so you know where you're going to go in each room. Because you're not supposed to go like running around the house to the perfect place. figure out where you're going to go in each room, go to that place, practice getting into that space. And the idea is that you get down, drop, cover, hold on, you get down on the ground underneath something, hold on to it with one hand, because the strong side to side motion tends to pull it away from you, and cover your head and neck. Face away from windows, because those can implode. If you're in a hallway, you just crouch down, cover your head and neck. On the stairs, sit on the stair, hold on, cover your head and neck. If you're in a wheelchair, turn away from windows, lock your wheels, and cover your head and neck. So it's mostly about protecting the good stuff up here, and making sure you're safe. And it is also a good time to, go over your plan and your kit with your family. It's, a good periodicity, once a year. I really encourage everyone to do it. It takes a minute, and it could save your life.
And everything you've just said, there's pointers to how to do it, what to do, etc. on shakeout.bc.
Yeah, so if I'm actually going to put it in the chat.
Why don't you put it in the Q&A where people can see
In
it?
the Q&A.
The chat might be restricted to you and me and
okay. There's shakeoutbc.ca, and you can go to, did that go?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
I
Okay.
think you
Yeah, if you go there, or to Grand Secus or Yukon, but we've got tons of resources on our website, what to do in different situations. Even if you're in a big box store, getting into the shelving is actually the best thing to do.
Great idea. Great idea. So you put that into the Q&A in a way that sort of moved it over to the answers
Oh, shoot.
part, but it was www.shakeoutbc.ca. An anonymous attendee said 10:17 at 10:17 a.m. Any special meanings to 10 and 17?
Well, it's because it's October 17th. So last year, I think it was on the 19th, so it was 10/19. We just changed the time to go with the date. It's always the third Thursday of October.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it coincides with most of the global shakeout drills. So millions of people do this the same day every year. There are a few countries that do it differently. I think Japan and New Zealand both have theirs to coincide with the anniversary of a major earthquake. Northern Italy does, but it's done all over the place. And I'm hoping that we can make it a national drill rather than just a provincial one, because I really, everyone needs to know how to do this.
Cool. Well, we have no open questions, and I think I've asked all the questions that I can think of. We are under no obligation to go to the end of the 90 minutes. So I am going to, unless you have any last minute thoughts that you want to leave us with? If you take nothing else away from this talk, it should be what?
Drop, cover, hold. It really, I just want people to be safe in an earthquake. And, if you do have strong shaking that lasts more than a minute, or it's difficult to stand, it's strong enough, it may have triggered a tsunami. So if you're near the coastline, get away from the coast and stay there. Oh, I think something else. Oh yeah, that was you.
Oh, yeah, Chris, you're quite welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for attending. Thanks everybody for attending this webinar. Thank you again, Alison, for a wonderful talk. Great, non-technical. I sometimes struggle to get people not to put equations into their slides. Grateful for that.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't do that to you.
Everybody again, next month on November the 8th, David Gregory from CoreLogic will speak to us about single site risk assessment and catastrophe risk software. So please join us for that. And I'll see you all next month. Thanks very much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Alice.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Thanksgiving. Bye.